The morning sun spilled gently through the kitchen window, brushing the wooden floor with a warm, golden light. Grace sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone slightly cold. The smell of roasted beans and toasted bread filled the small Maplewood kitchen, a scent that always reminded her of calmer times. Outside, the leaves swirled in the crisp autumn air, and the occasional bird song punctuated the soft hum of the refrigerator. It should have been a peaceful moment, ordinary and unremarkable. Yet Grace felt a quiet tension in the air, a subtle unease she couldn't place. Her son Ethan sat across from her, staring at the breakfast plate in front of him. His fork rested untouched on the table, and his brow was slightly furrowed. Usually, Ethan was lively in the mornings, cracking jokes, asking about the day ahead. But today, he was different. He seemed distant, thoughtful in a way that made Grace uneasy. She had noticed this change over the past few months, seriousness creeping into his eyes. A new maturity that sometimes felt almost too heavy for someone so young. She sipped her coffee, trying to shake off the feeling. "Mom," Ethan said finally, breaking the quiet. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made Grace pause mid-sip. "Can I ask you something?" She set her mug down, leaning forward slightly. "Of course, Ethan. What is it?" She replied, her voice steady but curious. There was something in his tone, something deliberate, that hinted this question wasn't ordinary. Ethan took a slow breath. He looked down at his hands, then back at his mother. "It's a little unusual," he said. His words made Grace's heart beat a little faster. She felt a mix of concern and curiosity. What could he possibly want to say that would feel unusual? She reached out, placing a reassuring hand on the table. "You can tell me anything, Ethan. I promise I won't judge." He hesitated, and the silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Grace felt the tension tighten in her chest. She watched his eyes, searching for clues. There was determination there, but also vulnerability. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "I want to help you, Mom. Not just with chores or errands or the usual things I do around the house. I want to help you in a bigger way. I think it could make you happy." Grace blinked, unsure what to say. She felt a strange mix of surprise and warmth. His words were innocent, yet they carried a depth that made her pause. She had always known Ethan cared for her, but this felt different. His tone, the way he looked at her, had suggested something more, something heartfelt and sincere. She wasn't sure if she should feel proud, worried, or a little overwhelmed. "What do you mean, Ethan?" she asked carefully. She didn't want to misinterpret him. And yet she couldn't ignore the flutter of emotion his words stirred in her heart. "I mean," Ethan continued, "I want to take care of you. I see how hard you work, how much you give to everyone else, and I want you to feel appreciated, loved, and cared for. You deserve that, Mom, more than you know." Grace felt a lump form in her throat. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had spent years putting everyone else first, her job, her friends, her family. She had quietly carried the weight of life's disappointments and small heartbreaks, never allowing herself to ask for help or admit that she longed for support, comfort, or even affection beyond the ordinary. And now, here was her son sitting across from her, offering exactly that. Her mind swirled with conflicting emotions. She felt gratitude, amazement, and a hint of worry. This was her grown son, her child. Yet the way he spoke suggested a deep emotional understanding, a desire to provide comfort and connection she hadn't realized she was missing. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the careful thought behind each word. It wasn't a casual offer. It was deliberate, considered, heartfelt. Ethan leaned slightly forward, his hand hovering above the table as if he wanted to bridge the space between them without overstepping. "I know it might sound strange," he said softly. I want you to be happy, Mom. Really happy. And I'm willing to do whatever I can to make that happen." Grace swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her mug. The words felt like a soft shock, unexpected yet somehow right. She could feel the weight of his sincerity pressing gently against her heart. She realized that this wasn't just about chores or small favors, it was an emotional offer, a promise of attention, care, an understanding she had longed for but rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. Her thoughts drifted to all the times she had silently hoped for someone to notice her, not just her efforts, but her feelings, her desires, her quiet needs. Ethan, in this ordinary kitchen, had seen all of that, and he had responded with a kind of empathy and devotion that left her stunned. She wanted to speak, to tell him that she appreciated his words, but nothing came out at first. Her mind raced with questions. Could she accept this? Would it change the way they related to each other? Was it appropriate, or was she reading too much into his intentions? And yet, beneath all the uncertainty, a warm, glowing sense of comfort began to spread through her chest. This was her son, yes, but it was also a human connection, a reminder that someone truly cared. Ethan watched her carefully, sensing her hesitation, but not pushing. His patience mirrored the quiet strength she had always admired in him. There was no rush, no demand, just a steady offer of support. A tender, emotional presence that asked only for acknowledgement. Grace finally found her voice trembling slightly. "Ethan, I don't know what to say," she admitted. Her words were raw, honest, and filled with a vulnerability she hadn't shared in years. "This is unexpected." "I don't need you to say anything, Mom," Ethan replied gently. "Just think about it. That's all I ask. I want to be here for you, however you'll let me." Grace felt a wave of emotion, gratitude, relief, and a strange, exhilarating curiosity about what this offer might mean. She realized that life sometimes presented moments of unexpected tenderness, moments that could quietly shift the rhythm of everyday life. If one was brave enough to accept them, the kitchen felt different now. The morning lights seemed warmer, the air softer. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded comforting. Grace took a deep breath, realizing that something had changed between her and her son. The ordinary space of the kitchen table had become the setting for an extraordinary moment, a turning point that promised emotional depth, connection, and perhaps even a new kind of happiness. As she looked at Ethan, she knew this conversation was only the beginning. The tension, the curiosity, and the warmth were all mixed into one fragile, potent moment. And Grace felt a small thrill of anticipation, wondering how this new understanding between them might unfold in the days ahead. After that quiet, surprising morning at the kitchen table, Grace couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's words. They echoed in her mind like a gentle, persistent melody. She kept replaying the way he had looked at her, his steady gaze filled with care and understanding. It was unusual, almost startling, to feel that kind of attention from someone who had always been her child. Yet, beneath the initial surprise, there was warmth. It's a quiet sense of being seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Grace went through her usual routine, tidying the living room, sorting through bills, preparing lunch, but her mind was elsewhere. Every small task felt lighter, almost joyful, because of Ethan's words. She realized she had spent so many years focusing on everyone else's happiness that she had almost forgotten how it felt to have someone care purely for her. Ethan, true to his word, did not press the topic. He moved around the house with his usual calm efficiency, washing the dishes she had left in the sink, arranging the books scattered on the couch, and leaving gentle reminders of care. A clean towel folded on the counter, a note on the fridge saying, "Take a break today, Mom." Every small action reminded Grace of his sincerity, and she couldn't help but smile, feeling both loved and slightly emotional. That evening, as the autumn sky painted the horizon in shades of pink and gold, Grace found herself alone on the porch with a cup of tea. She thought about her past, about all the quiet heartbreaks and sacrifices she had made. She remembered the late nights spent working extra hours, the friends she had lost touch with, the relationships that had faded because she prioritized others above herself. In those memories, she realized she had often felt lonely, though she never admitted it even to herself. Ethan's offer stirred something deep inside her. It wasn't just about help or practical support. It was an acknowledgement of her feelings, a recognition that she deserved attention and care. It was rare for anyone to see her so fully, and rarer still for someone to respond with genuine, unselfish intent. Her heart swelled with gratitude and a quiet longing, a mix of emotions she hadn't expected to confront. The next morning, the tension returned to the kitchen, though this time it was softer, warmer. Ethan was already at the table reading a book, his coffee steaming beside him. He looked up and smiled when he saw Grace entering. "Morning, Mom," he said casually. But his eyes carried that same depth of care that had startled her before. "Morning." "Ethan," Grace replied, her voice gentle. She felt the curiosity in her chest grow again. What exactly did he mean by taking care of her? How far did he intend to go, and would she feel comfortable letting him? Ethan placed his book down and leaned forward slightly. "Mom, I just want you to know that I mean what I said yesterday," he began softly. "I don't want to force anything. I just want to be there for you in ways that make your life easier, happier. You don't have to decide right now. Just know that I'm here." Grace felt a lump in her throat again, her emotions tugging her in different directions. There was a tenderness in his voice, a patient understanding, and yet an intensity that made her heart beat faster. She realized that his offer wasn't casual, it was deliberate, thought out, and deeply emotional. He had noticed her struggles, her quiet exhaustion, her longing for someone to truly see her. She found herself remembering moments from years ago when she had quietly wished for connection, for attention, for love that felt sincere. She thought about how lonely life had sometimes felt even when surrounded by people. And now, here was her son, grown and thoughtful, offering something she hadn't dared hope for: a consistent presence, a caring hand, and a listening heart. Grace took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel the weight of the moment. "Ethan, I didn't realize how much I needed someone to care like this," she admitted softly. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, words felt unnecessary. The kitchen was filled with a quiet, comforting energy, space where emotions could exist without fear or judgment. Ethan smiled, sensing her vulnerability without taking advantage of it. "It's okay, Mom. You don't have to say more. I just want you to know that you're not alone, and I'm here whenever you want me." The day stretched on, and Grace noticed small changes in herself. She felt lighter, more open to emotions she had buried under years of responsibility. Even ordinary moments, like watching the sunlight filter through the curtains or listening to the wind rustle the autumn leaves, felt richer, more meaningful. Ethan's presence, even in its quiet ways, reminded her of the beauty in connection and the importance of allowing oneself to receive care. One afternoon, they shared a simple activity together, folding laundry. Grace had always treated chores as solitary work, but with Ethan beside her, it became a shared experience. They laughed quietly at mismatched socks and playful jokes about missing buttons. Grace realized that these small moments carried a deeper significance. They were building trust, comfort, and a subtle emotional intimacy that felt safe and nurturing. By evening, Grace's thoughts returned to her own heart. She remembered the relationships she had once dreamed of, the kind of companionship she had imagined in her youth. Those memories were bittersweet, tinged with regret and longing. But Ethan's presence now offered a quiet reassurance that perhaps life still held unexpected kindnesses. That night, as she prepared for bed, Grace reflected on the unusual offer Ethan had made. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. She loved him as her son, but it stirred deep emotions. A sense of being truly cared for and appreciated. It reminded her that emotional intimacy and understanding could exist in many forms, sometimes in the most unexpected places. She realized she had a choice. She could allow herself to accept his care, to let him be part of her life in a deeper, more meaningful way. Or she could retreat into old habits of independence and quiet solitude. The thought of embracing this offer filled her with both excitement and nervousness. She understood that allowing someone to care for you fully required trust, courage, and vulnerability, all things she had rarely given herself permission to experience. The next morning, she sat again at the kitchen table, her coffee steaming in the soft light. Ethan looked at her, patient and calm, and she felt a flicker of determination. Perhaps it was time to let someone in, to accept help and care, to allow herself to feel appreciated and seen. Perhaps it was time to step into a chapter of her life where love and attention weren't just fantasies, but living, breathing realities she could embrace in small, meaningful ways. As they exchanged quiet smiles, Grace felt the beginning of a subtle shift, a gentle unfolding of emotions she hadn't known she could still experience. The house, the kitchen, and the simple act of sharing breakfast had become a setting for emotional growth, a place where old memories met new possibilities. She didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope and a deep, tender gratitude for the unexpected gift her son had offered. And as Ethan poured his coffee and passed her a warm, freshly baked muffin, Grace realized that life sometimes offered the most extraordinary moments in the most ordinary places. The weeks that followed, Ethan's surprising offer passed with a quiet rhythm. The small gestures he had started, folding laundry, leaving notes, making her favorite coffee, continued. But now they carried an emotional depth Grace had not expected. Each act, though ordinary in itself, began to feel like a thread weaving their lives closer together. Grace noticed it first in subtle ways: the warmth that spread through her chest when he left her a note, the soft smile that lingered after a shared laugh, the sense of calm that settled over her when he quietly completed tasks she had long thought endless. One rainy afternoon, the kind of day that draped the house in gray and muted sounds, Grace found herself sitting at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee. The rain tapped lightly against the window, and the familiar scent of wet leaves mingled with the rich aroma of her drink. Ethan joined her, carrying 2 mugs, and placed one in front of her without a word. She looked up at him and saw the same steady, caring gaze she had noticed weeks ago. "Thanks, Ethan," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the gentle patter of rain. "You don't need to thank me." "Mom," he replied, his tone warm and patient. "I like doing it. Seeing you smile, it matters to me." Grace felt her heart tighten. The sincerity in his words was undeniable. He wasn't looking for praise or recognition. He genuinely wanted to contribute to her happiness. She thought about how rare it was to feel seen in that way, how rare it was to have someone care so deeply without expectation. She stirred her coffee, watching the steam rise, and let herself speak the words she had been holding back. "Ethan, I never realized how much I missed this, how much I needed it," she admitted quietly. Her eyes met his, and she felt a connection that was comforting yet stirring in ways she couldn't fully explain. "All these years, I've focused on others, and I forgot what it feels like to be cared for, really cared for." Ethan reached across the table, placing his hand lightly near hers, not touching, but offering a sense of presence and reassurance. "You deserve it, Mom," he said simply. "You've always been there for everyone else. Let me be here for you now. I don't want anything in return except knowing you feel a little lighter, a little happier." Grace felt a lump form in her throat. The room seemed to shrink, and the rain outside became a gentle soundtrack to the moment. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel completely vulnerable, to acknowledge her longing for companionship, understanding, and emotional support. She realized that her son's offer was not just a practical one, yet was emotional, profound, and transformative in its own quiet way. They sat together in silence for a few moments, sipping their coffee, the rain falling in a soft rhythm outside. Grace noticed the subtle comfort in Ethan's presence. It wasn't overbearing or demanding. It was steady, reliable, and caring. In his quiet way, he had created a space where she could feel safe, where her emotions were acknowledged, and where her heart could start to heal from years of quiet neglect. "I've missed this," Grace said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "I've missed feeling like someone truly understands me, like I'm not just a caretaker, but a person who matters." Ethan's gaze softened. "You matter, Mom. You always have. And now I want you to feel that every day. You don't have to do everything on your own. You can let me help. Let me be here." Grace felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a touch of excitement. It was rare to experience such genuine care, and she realized how starved her heart had been for this kind of emotional connection. It wasn't romance in the traditional sense, but it carried its own intensity, a bond of trust, understanding, and mutual respect that felt deeply satisfying. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that. Memories from her childhood, funny stories from his school days, plans for the coming week, but the underlying emotional connection remained. Grace noticed how effortlessly the room seemed to glow with a new energy. Even the rain seemed less dreary, more like a gentle companion to their shared presence. She realized that moments like this, simple and ordinary on the surface, could carry extraordinary emotional weight when shared with someone who truly cared. As the days went by, their bond continued to grow. Ethan learned her routines, anticipating her needs without being asked. He noticed when she looked tired and suggested small breaks, when she seemed stressed and offered gentle distractions, and when she appeared reflective and simply sat with her in companionable silence. Each gesture, though minor, added layers to their connection. Grace began to recognize the depth of thought behind each action, the careful attention that made her feel valued and loved in a quiet, mature way. One evening, after a long day of work, Grace returned home to find the kitchen glowing with soft light. The table was set with 2 cups of tea, a small plate of cookies, and a note in Ethan's neat handwriting. "Just a moment to relax. You deserve it." She smiled, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It was a simple act, yet it spoke volumes. It was an acknowledgement of her worth, a reminder that someone noticed, cared, and wanted to make her life lighter. Sitting down, she poured the tea and gestured for Ethan to join her. "You don't have to do this every day," she said softly, though her voice carried gratitude. "I want to," he replied calmly. "It makes me happy to see you happy. That's enough for me." Grace felt a profound sense of relief. For so long, she had carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, believing she had to manage everything alone. But now, she was learning that accepting help, care, and emotional presence didn't make her weak. It made her human. It made her feel alive in ways she hadn't expected. As they sipped their tea, Grace reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the quiet mornings, the small gestures, and the heartfelt conversations that had slowly shifted the tone of their relationship. It was not a sudden transformation, but a gradual awakening, a recognition that emotional intimacy could exist in many forms. Even in a parent-child relationship, the rain had stopped, leaving the world outside glistening and fresh. The kitchen, bathed in warm light, and the lingering aroma of tea and cookies felt like a sanctuary. Grace realized that she had begun to trust again, to open her heart to care and attention she had long denied herself. She understood that this bond with Ethan, though unusual in its emotional depth, was a gift, a rare, steady, an unwavering form of love that could bring joy, comfort, and healing by the time the evening ended. Grace felt a renewed sense of hope. She had discovered that happiness didn't always come from grand gestures or dramatic events. Sometimes it emerged quietly in shared cups of coffee, small acts of consideration, and the gentle understanding of someone who truly saw you. She knew the path ahead would require trust, patience, and vulnerability, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to embrace it. And as Ethan cleared the table and smiled at her, Grace felt an unspoken promise that life, even after years of sacrifice and quiet longing, could still offer moments of profound connection, tenderness, and emotional fulfillment. The days after that rainy afternoon became a new rhythm for Grace and Ethan. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a gentle balance of care, attention, and mutual respect that neither had experienced before. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and profoundly comforting. Grace noticed how natural it felt to let Ethan share her world in ways she had never allowed anyone before. The small routines, morning coffee, shared meals, quiet walks suddenly carried emotional weight, turning ordinary moments into something extraordinary. One golden autumn evening, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, casting soft, warm patterns on the table. Ethan had set 2 mugs of hot cocoa in front of them, and beside them was a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked from the garden. Grace smiled, touched by the simple gesture. She realized that over the past few weeks, these small acts had become a steady source of comfort, a reminder that someone truly cared for her well-being and happiness. "You didn't have to get flowers," Grace said softly, her fingers brushing against the petals. "I know," Ethan replied, his voice calm and warm. "I just wanted to. You've done so much for me over the years. I just want you to feel appreciated, Mom. That's enough reason for me." Grace felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, harder to name. It wasn't romantic in the usual sense, but it carried a tenderness, a gentle longing, and a profound connection that made her heart ache in a way that was both new and familiar. She realized how much she had missed feeling truly seen, valued and cared for in a thoughtful, steady way. As they sipped their cocoa, they talked about their day, their plans, and even shared small confessions. Grace laughed quietly at Ethan's stories about his colleagues at work, and he smiled at her reactions, noticing the subtle ways her eyes sparkled when she felt relaxed and happy. It was a slow, unfolding intimacy, built not on passion or drama, but on attention, empathy, and genuine care. Over the next few weeks, Grace allowed herself to lean more into Ethan's support. He didn't push. He simply showed up. He offered help with errands, suggested quiet breaks when she seemed overworked, and learned to anticipate her moods, offering companionship or silence as needed. Grace found herself feeling lighter, freer, and more open than she had in years. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to enjoy the moments without guilt or self-doubt. One evening, as twilight settled over Maplewood, Grace sat on the porch with Ethan beside her. The sky was painted in shades of purple and pink, the first stars beginning to twinkle above. They didn't speak for a while, simply enjoying the calm of the evening. Grace felt the depth of her emotions, the quiet thrill of being acknowledged and cared for, and the simple joy of having someone who truly understood her. "Mom," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence, "I hope you know that I don't want to take over your life. I just want to be part of it in a way that makes you happier, lighter, and more at peace." Grace looked at him, feeling a mixture of affection and gratitude. "Ethan, I think I've forgotten what it feels like to let someone care for me this way," she admitted, her voice soft. "I've spent so long taking care of everyone else that I didn't even know I needed this." "Needed you." He smiled gently. "You deserve it, Mom. You deserve to feel happy and supported. I'm just here to help make that possible." The sincerity in his eyes, the quiet determination, and the steady warmth of his presence reassured Grace more than words could express. She realized that emotional intimacy didn't have to be complicated or overwhelming. Sometimes it simply existed in shared smiles, thoughtful gestures, and the calm assurance that someone was truly there for you. As the weeks turned into months, Grace noticed subtle changes in herself. She laughed more freely, rested without guilt, and embraced small joys without hesitation. Ethan's support had become a foundation, a steady presence that allowed her to explore emotions she had buried under years of responsibility. Even simple tasks like preparing a meal or tending the garden felt lighter when shared. She realized that allowing herself to receive care did not make her weak. It made her human, alive, and deeply connected to the people she loved. One weekend, they decided to bake together in the kitchen. Flour dusted the counters and laughter echoed through the house as they mixed ingredients, tasted spoonfuls of batter, and joked about their attempts at perfect pastries. Grace felt a rush of happiness, a sense of being fully present, fully alive, and fully cared for. It was not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet, powerful affirmation that connection and love could exist in gentle, enduring forms. Later that evening, after cleaning the kitchen, they sat together with steaming mugs of tea. Grace reflected on the journey they had shared so far, the surprise of his offer, the emotional adjustments, the quiet acts of kindness, and the steady growth of trust between them. She realized how rare it was to find someone who not only understood you, but also actively sought to make your life better without demanding anything in return. I never thought moments like this could feel so full, Grace said softly, her fingers wrapped around the warm mug. I didn't realize how much I needed this kind of connection. Ethan reached across the table, placing his hand near hers, a simple gesture of support and understanding. It's not too late to feel it, Mom. You can still have it every day if you want. You just have to allow yourself to accept it. Grace smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. She understood that life didn't always offer dramatic gestures or sweeping changes. But it did offer small, steady opportunities for emotional growth, connection, and happiness. She had discovered that opening her heart, even a little, could transform ordinary moments into meaningful experiences. The days that followed were filled with quiet routines that now carried emotional resonance. Morning coffees, shared meals, gentle laughter, and thoughtful gestures became a rhythm of comfort and warmth. Grace felt secure in the knowledge that Ethan's presence was constant, patient, and nurturing. It was a rare and precious gift, a steady bond of care, trust, and emotional intimacy. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan placed a small vase of fresh flowers on the table. "For you, Mom," he said softly. "Just because—" Grace felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude and joy, not sadness. She realized that happiness could be found in the simplest gestures when they came from someone who truly cared. She knew that this gentle, steadfast love, built on empathy and understanding, would continue to shape her life in ways she hadn't dared imagine. Sitting together in the soft glow of the evening, Grace felt a quiet, thrilling sense of hope. Life had offered her an unexpected gift, not loud or dramatic, but steady, enduring, and profoundly meaningful. The kitchen table, once a place of routine and quiet solitude, had become the heart of their emotional connection, a space where laughter, reflection, and heartfelt gestures flourished.